Hi everyone. Today we'll be doing a react video, which is to say an unscripted video where I'm reacting to several bits of news that I believe merit public widespread concern. One of those is the policing of sex work and free speech versus the Supreme Court. Another is Trump's bill gutting Medicaid and in effect telling people what Medicaid can and cannot treat. And last but not least, we'll also discuss the legality of various actions insofar as both of those two basic things are concerned, and what that effectively means from a theoretical standpoint and what we need to do about it from a praxial standpoint. So, first and foremost, what's happening right now in America is effectively capital in decay. The state's power overseas is declining. Its ability to police the world around it is declining. And as a result, they are turning their attention inwards. Instead of them being able to effectively own and police the Middle East and the global South, they are turning their attention inwards towards the imperial core itself, the United States, and those who live within it, regardless of who they are, will become subject to state power in a way that is ultimately harmful. America is a settler colony, America is a police state, and the reality of that situation will become increasingly clear as Trump, now basically in a position of total impunity, law by executive order, the checks and balances that people like to think kept things orderly, will cease to be, have ceased to be, and because of that, Trump is now effectively able to do whatever he wants. There's no one holding him and those who work for him accountable, and they will effectively strong-arm the system as it exists to not only abuse it, but dismantle it further so they can continue taking away people's basic human rights. What's happening overseas now and historically in the past will start to happen increasingly on home soil. So that effectively sums up the larger situation at hand. The state is being dismantled, and the money is going to be used to basically turn people into profit. It will be the state's right to profit at the expense of people, explicitly by taking away people's rights and profiting off them. America is a settler colony and a police state, a surveillance state, what have you, but it will also, as time goes on, increasingly become a prison colony. More and more prisons will be built to house people who dissent, people who speak out. They are doing that to imprison people who will speak out against what's happening right now in regards to the human rights abuses that we're going to be discussing. The denial of health care is a human rights abuse. The imprisonment of people without due process is a violation of their basic human rights. The denial of free speech is a denial of someone's basic human rights. Furthermore, the right to free speech, in particular, is from the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment, and the right to free speech is incredibly important. The right to assembly for purposes of free speech, speaking out against government abuses. These are things that are under attack. One of the ways that they're under attack is by denying people health care, and furthermore taking the money that would go towards Medicaid and using that to build what is effectively concentration camps. Alligator Alcatraz, for instance, is a repurposed facility that was taken from someone who, as far as I understand it, owned it privately, and it has been converted into a concentration camp with the beds so closely together they resemble the bed arrangement at not just Alcatraz, but Auschwitz. So they will be not only confiscating former residences or property more broadly, to turn them into prisons. They will be building new prisons, and these prisons will be used for profit. It will be profitable to house criminals, and through a state of crisis that is constantly growing, and in turn, a growing state of exception mid-crisis as capital continues to decay, the demand for profit will supersede basic human rights at home. The rights of citizens are being eroded and taken away as we speak. And that is effectively what we'll be discussing here as I go over these points. This is just further context to talk about that. So, first and foremost, let's go over those points. There's basically three of them that I wanted to discuss. One, the FSC versus Paxton in Texas regarding the policing of pornography and treating it as obscene in the eyes of minors through the state. It's a form of prohibition, essentially. It is an attack on sex worker rights, but it's also something that can very easily be applied to anything the state deems obscene. It is a huge attack on free speech, and we'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about Medicaid and how not only is President Trump and Congress gutting Medicaid and using the money to fund ICE and effectively the police state as we know it, they are also effective immediately denying people the ability to use Medicaid to pay for care at Planned Parenthood. This is effectively a form of forced denial of prophylactics of healthcare regarding sexual needs. This includes birth control. This includes any service that Planned Parenthood provides. So anything that Medicaid could be used for at Planned Parenthood has effectively been denied instantly, just like that. So that is something else I wanted to mention and discuss. And then last but not least, there are several videos at the end here that we'll also talk about. Specifically the legality of all of this, and again, the theory behind it in terms of why all this is happening, what it signifies, and what we as workers need to do, insofar as all of that goes. So, as far as all of these things that we'll be discussing, I'm going to go through them in order. We'll start with the FSC versus Paxton, and effectively on July 1st, the FSC lost versus Paxton at the Supreme Court decision here reads, decided June 27th, 2025, where Texas, like many states, prohibits distributing sexually explicit content to children. In 2023, Texas enacted HB 1181, requiring certain commercial websites publishing sexually explicit content that is obscene to minors to verify that visitors are 18 or older. Knowing violations subject covered entities to injunctions and civil penalties. So effectively, this decision that was levied in 2023 has been defended by the Supreme Court, which effectively, makes it case law at this point. It is backed up by the highest court in the land, and the highest court in the land ruled that, at least within Texas, on a state level, they can prohibit the access of pornography through websites by gatekeeping it, essentially saying, okay, it's not enough to say that you are 18 or older when you click on the website. You have to provide a form of ID, which unto itself is a huge privacy violation, but also it is something that will become increasingly relevant regarding the Miller test. The Miller test is something that's discussed repeatedly here because HB 1181 simply requires proof of age to access content that is obscene to minors. It does not directly regulate adults' protected speech. And that's what this lovely little thing says. But the reality is that Project 2025 wants to bypass the Miller test altogether. The reality of the situation is right now everything is subject to the Miller test, supposedly in terms of determining what obscenity is, but Project 2025 will effectively make that a thing of the past, and it will require a substantial amount of leverage from the establishment in the future if they want to try and reverse that. But given the direction things are going in, I highly doubt that happening. It's not something that they have historically challenged, which is why we're in this mess to begin with. But the reality is that the states, it's now up to states to effectively prohibit access of pornography by forcing people to submit ID when accessing commercial public websites, which again is a privacy violation, but also the obscenity laws are things that are going to become increasingly vague. The Miller test, for instance, is something that is going to be swept aside in favor of the vaguest of obscenity laws. Obscenity laws that I would add include not just sex workers more broadly, but also queer people. And it won't stop there, because you have to keep in mind that all of this serves profit. And whatever they can do to make money, not just imprisoning people, but silencing them, it will start to a smaller degree, targeting a smaller minority. And yet, by saying that they'll only target a smaller minority, they are passing laws, such as Project 2025 and its effects on obscenity, to target the broadest number of people. And what they're essentially doing is, promising, pinky promise, a gentleman's agreement, that they will only punish select groups of people, but they will have the power, in the eyes of the court, to punish whoever they want. And their desire to punish whoever they want will increase as crisis rises. Crisis is something that fascism invents to steal power. It steals power from positions of power that already exist to weaponize those, not just against foreign populations, which is bad enough, but domestic populations. And again, the Imperial Boomerang is swinging back around away from foreign lands and going inwards. And what they are doing is they are effectively colonizing their own population, workers, us. And it's starting with queer people. It's starting with sex workers. It's starting with migrants. And it will expand outwards from those minorities to affect other groups. And they'll be able to do that because in their mind, they'll be able to do that because they are passing these laws that effectively are not only passed through Congress to take money away from workers in regards to Medicaid, but they'll also be taking away people's rights in the process. When they are attacking us by passing these laws, they are doing it through laws that they can apply to anyone, not just queer people. When you go after obscenity laws, the seemingly small decision in Texas to say, oh, well, you have to have a form of ID to be able to say something if we find it obscene, that will expand far beyond sex work. This is something that they can use to apply to all forms of speech, not just sex work, because if they find something offensive through Project 2025, it doesn't have to be pornography. It could just be, for instance, queer people. But the same exact thing will also apply to people who are not queer. It can be any enemy of the state, anyone who disagrees with the state. And again, all of this will serve profit. And as the need for profit arises, because it does automatically through capital, it is going to continue cannibalizing itself. It has become, like fascism, a cancer. Except historically, for instance, fascism in World War II was away from America. It was in Nazi Germany. It was something that could be effectively treated as a faraway concern. But now fascism has come home to empire. Fascism itself is described as imperialism come home to empire. But fascism came home to the Weimar Republic. It became the Third Reich. Well, now, those ideas, which actually originated in America, have come home to the mother country. And these are some of the things that are occurring. They are going to make it so that anything obscene can be decided by the states, and eventually, I would imagine, at the federal level. This is just the beginning, and it's only going to get worse. This is the beginning of prohibition as we know it. It will start with policing certain forms of speech regarding certain people, but when Project 2025 goes into effect, which for all intents and purposes, why wouldn't it? They passed Trump's big, beautiful bill, which cuts Medicaid and assigns hundreds of billions of dollars to ICE and the building of prisons to house dissenters, or just effectively anyone they feel like because they want to make more and more money. If you've ever seen The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, where they want to drain Gelfling of their essence to effectively drink it like vampires, that's what's happening. This is a core important step in doing that. They will demand identification to validate whether or not you can say anything at all, and then in the same breath, or in tandem at the very least, they will make what is obscene relative to the use of ID something that is much more nebulous than the Miller test currently affords. And the Miller test is what I rely on and what I've spoken about in a past video to be able to do the work that I do, which is predominantly about education, which is predominantly about harm reduction. The state isn't trying to protect children or adults or allow people to speak freely. It is restricting people's rights. It is rescinding their right to free speech under the false pretense of protecting children. Think of the women and children. And they're doing it in an underhanded way to make it seem like, oh, well, we're doing this for your protection. And it'll probably only affect, it's a small group of people. When in reality, this is a wide sweeping thing. And it will, similar to, say, Star Wars, take the last remnants of the Republic and sweep them aside for total imperial control. Fascism is when imperialism comes home to empire. And instead of it being, oh, it's off in Nazi Germany, now it's at home. And this is one aspect of it. The other thing I wanted to mention, the second point, there's a third point after that we'll talk about, which is the legality and the theory and workers' roles in challenging that. But before we get to that, the second point is the denial of healthcare. So the first point was the denial of free speech, finding ways to broaden obscenity and then basically force people or to tie their tongues when they're talking about something that the state views as offensive in increasingly vague ways during a state of rising crisis, of decay, all to basically cannibalize workers. The second point that I wanted to raise and return to is President Trump and Congress blocking patients from using Medicaid to pay for care at Planned Parenthood, effective immediately. I got this message, on the 4th of July. Happy 4th of July. If you wanted to get tested for STDs, if you wanted to have an abortion, if you wanted to have gender-affirming care, all of those things, this is a denial of our basic human right to have health care. So Medicaid is being gutted, but even if it wasn't being gutted, Planned Parenthood can no longer accept it. And while they're gutting it, I might add, they're taking all of the money that you wouldn't even be able to use, apparently, at Planned Parenthood to, again, fund the Gestapo, the American version of the SS, drag people off to prisons without due process. They can do this now. This is something that is being done, and they are doing it to an accelerating degree. They are doing it to not just migrants, even though that's completely wrong and should never be done to anyone, but they're not going to stop there. They're going to start doing it to American citizens. They'll start with people who are more marginalized, black and brown people specifically, but also political activists, people who speak out, people who have to go to court and are picked up at the courthouse because it's a public space, and they're effectively black-bagged and disappeared without due process and taken off to camps. The camps, instead of being off in Poland somewhere, they are literally on, they're building prisons on American soil, and there are territories that are effectively in cahoots with the United States that also have camps as well. So these kinds of things, again, go arm in arm. These are not separate events. Prohibition, in regards to the denial of free speech, goes hand in hand with the denial of health care, goes hand in hand with the denial to not be locked up without due process. What is the charge? For eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal? This is not democracy manifest. So, keeping all of that in mind, the denial of healthcare is just another step in regards to that. And if you wanted to talk about that, what if the state makes it obscene to speak out against those in power? The leader is always right. Fair principle, leader principle, force of will. All of these things will become the daily norm. It will become the status quo. It's already here. The invasion is a structure. That structure was built hundreds of years ago, and now it is being turned on its own population. It is cannibalizing the rights of those at home because the empire is dying. And to try and keep itself alive, it will take those who, again, the Dark Crystal, right? The Gelfling, where they were oftentimes servants of the Skeksis, were taken by the Lords of the Crystal when the crystal cracked and drained of their essence. And it was something that people knew about. It was something that the moment things turned inwards, right? Normally the crystal would go outwards in terms of, where they accessed their ability to cheat death again, use the crystal to keep themselves alive. Suddenly it stopped working. And in order to keep themselves alive, the Skeksis would drain their servants, the Gelfling, to keep themselves alive. And when that happens, the Gelflings started to turn on each other to feed members of their own to the Skeksis. It's a Holocaust narrative where people will tokenize and punch down to avoid going into the furnaces, because the furnace is effectively a mouth of the state cannibalizing labor. So this aspect of Planned Parenthood is just another component of that. The state is retaining its power, and in order to hold on to that while it's dying, it will effectively take away people's rights. It will create a crisis. There will be an enemy within, and various other aspects of fascism. Umberto Eco's 14 points. All of the things that we're talking about here: prohibition for free speech, the denial of health care, the theft of money that would go towards health care, but also wage theft, wage slavery, labor theft more broadly. All of this serves the profit motive in a way where the Imperial Boomerang has swung back around. That brings us to our third point. We're not going to watch the entirety of this video, just that this Professor Jiang clips where they are giving a lecture. Putin's War is for the Soul, Geostrategy number 9. This clip is apparently from that, and consumerism is the perfection of slavery. And they talk about a couple of different points, but one thing in particular that they discuss is how up to a certain point, workers were valued before the rise of embedded liberalism in the United States and the New Deal before that, where certain concessions were made with the working class during the onset of, well, the Great Depression, but also the war economy going into World War II, and basically the allowal of fascism to happen in Nazi Germany, the Marshall Plan forcing Germany to default on a bunch of loans instead of paying them back, which tanked their economy. Fascism rose out of that, and then America could fight fascism abroad to regenerate itself, and not only that, come out on top at the end of World War II and have basically complete, geopolitical dominance. And from there, you saw not the end of war, but the rescuing of war. Captain America, it's noble to fight Nazis, and then suddenly fascism didn't die with Hitler. Fascism wasn't something that came from Germany. I mean, Hitler took it, a lot of his ideas from Mussolini, but then also from the United States. And Mussolini himself said fascism is the merger of corporation and state. So the merger of corporation and state is something that you're seeing right now. Not just the military-industrial complex, but the prison-industrial complex, the medical-industrial complex, the media-industrial complex. Any industrial complex that you could care to think of, anything that exists is tied to the profit motive, which, again, through the merger of corporation and state, is taking away people's rights. And they're inventing all of these reasons to, again, through empire in decline, cannibalize the home front, because they're not really able to do it abroad to nearly the same degree that they were. And Professor Jiang here talks about how there was a point of workers being devalued before a certain point in history, basically before the 1930s and 40s and the rise of World War II. And then suddenly after that, you had this ostensible, at least for people on the home front, golden era. And after that, in the 1970s and 80s, you went away from defending and valuing workers to defending and valuing profit. You went from valuing egalitarianism and socialism and various social aspects on the American side of things, which is what Professor Jiang is talking about, to the valuing of inequality, the valuing of through neoliberalism and a freeing of the market through the bourgeoisie deregulating everything for profit, a valuing of inequality pursuant to profit. And because of that basic change, suddenly workers became expendable. They had to create value to survive. And they have various other things written on the board, like Francis Fukuyama's End of History. And there's a couple other things as well, Karl Marx. And their handwriting is pretty awful, but which, isn't surprising given, they're a professor. But they talk about basically in the 1980s, they're effectively describing the rise of neoliberalism. And neoliberalism, as it began to emerge through Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, you had basically a shifting away from the rights of workers and the value of workers towards the valuing of corporations, the valuing of profit, the valuing of inequality. The state wants things to be unequal through what Kristeva would call the process of abjection, the creation of us versus them. They have a point here. Capitalism is alienating, dehumanizing. So you have the us versus them dynamic, fear of immigrants, fear of sex workers, virgin whore, and various other forms of alienation. Capital alienates everything. It also fetishizes or sexualizes everything, per my arguments, based on Marx. And it uses that to, in the neoliberal era, exploit workers. And that has been something where all of the social aspects, the socialist aspects of just within America itself and the imperial core that emerged after the Great Depression were slowly chipped away from the 70s onwards. The development of neoliberalism basically started after the oil crash in 1973, and from there, 7 years later, you had the rise of Margaret Thatcher, and then Ronald Reagan in 1981, and then every American president and every British prime minister, the West more broadly would chip away all of these social components pursuant to profit, again, to deregulate the market. So the deregulation of the market coincides with a rise of profit by chipping away people's basic human rights. And when they are no longer able to conduct genocide overseas, they will invent a crisis at home and conduct genocide there, calling it protection. It's the same exact thing that's happening overseas. It'll just be the Imperial Boomerang coming back around. And in regards to that, political consciousness and organization is something that Professor Jiang has written on the board here. But in light of that, there's something that I call praxial inertia, where political consciousness and organization is praxis. It is applied theory. So all this theoretical shit on the board, all this stuff that I've been talking about, is something that we have to take and apply ourselves. We can't rely on the establishment, because the establishment, they are literally the ones right now who are robbing us blind. It's not like Trump is the bad guy by himself. He and those of his administration, but also the instruments of capital itself. The fortress has become a Death Star where the laser is pointed at Alderaan. And it is the bombing of the home world by the instrument of war itself. And this is a huge problem, because we can't just view it as, oh, well, people, talk about the legality of this and how, normally it would be okay, except now it's just being misused. And the reality of the situation is that it was always being misused, but now it's being misused in ways that people at home are going to feel it more and more and more. And it's not going to stop unless we organize, unless we fight back, and we stop talking about this in a way that is defending the system itself. The system is the problem. Invasion is a structure, and that invasion has come home to roost. That brings us to our third point, the so-called legality of things, where Kat Black talks about it, and this is a fairly short clip, so I'll play it.
Okay, something I'm getting really tired of hearing over and over again is, it's illegal. Oh my God, it's illegal. They're doing it. And
Oops.
Okay, something I'm getting really tired of hearing over and over again is, it's illegal. Oh my God, it's illegal. They're doing it and it's illegal. I don't know why you guys actually ever bought into the idea that these people cared about legality, and that you didn't even understand, looking at our history, that these people have only really used legality so that they had a source of, validity, I guess, to do the fucked up shit they've always wanted to do. Like, legality is not a line for morality. We live in a country that has a history of violent colonization, where people didn't care about the legality of certain people, where people were dehumanized, and then said that because they weren't legal citizens of this new thing that they're creating here, that they didn't deserve to have access to certain things. Like, that is quite literally the basis of this country.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. The party of law and order, Nixon called it, and they enacted drug war, the fear of crime, the rise of rape accusations, and various other things. Law and order is a use of order to maintain the status quo. Peace is the absence of tension through the white moderate, vis-a-vis Martin Luther King letter from Birmingham jail. And law and order is a tool historically of the white moderate, and to some extent the reactionary, though the reactionary and the fascists more broadly will throw aside law altogether and enact basically an iron grip on the institutions of imperialism to police the local population. Again, the Death Star pointing the laser at Alderaan, for instance, but also Kefka Palazzo from Final Fantasy VI, the Eye of Judgment, right? Where he's basically taking the power of the gods, the power of empire, and turning it against the empire itself. Same idea. And there's a gazillion other stories through capitalist realism and hauntology, canceled future, that talk about that. Except now, the reality outside of these stories is mirroring the one that those stories were warning about. And anything that you look at, the Terminator and Skynet, there is no fictional other that is going to come from somewhere else and colonize us, because the state is the imperial core. It does the colonizing. And the veneer of legality is just an instrument for them to have been able to do that with impunity. And that will become impossible to maintain when they pull the veil aside and they bring the soldiers to the home front to conduct imperialism amongst marginalized communities, but also the very middle class that was basically playing ball for the elite. It won't just stop with people of color. It won't just stop with immigrants. It won't stop with queer people. The very things that they use to attack them, it is not a surgeon's scalpel. It is a bazooka. And it will be fired in such a way that affects everyone. And they want that, too. This is not an accident. This has been done many, many times. We're dealing with people that, through a system that has been designed to exploit people en masse for centuries. And this has occurred at home and abroad for those centuries into the present space and time, when the rights of all citizens are being eroded simultaneously, and they will begin to attack or cannibalize the ones that have always been cannibalized, but with the veil pulled aside in ways where people realize that if they speak out and they have relative privilege, those privileges can easily be taken away. It's Darth Vader doing the Force joke. Oh, you don't want to toe the line? Well, okay. Get fucked, basically. So, Cat Black is absolutely right. They can't do that. It's illegal. It's just a way of putting one's head in the sand or gaslighting oneself or others. It is an argument that is basically moot at this point. Legality, the party of law and order, the white moderacy, or just token moderacy for that matter, is rapidly being swept aside for rampant fascism. And this is something that has been a long time coming, since before I was born, for instance, before many of you were born. This is something that has been happening since at least the 1970s. And all of the societal gains of earlier times, from embedded liberalism and the civil rights movement, free love, and feminism, and second wave feminism going into third wave feminism, all of these things will be anathema, which brings us back to the prohibition side of things. Instead of saying useful things like, hey, we need to stick together and fight against the establishment, because the establishment is the Death Star, and it's run by Darth Vader and his cronies serving the Emperor, serving the bourgeoisie. They're doing this to us. We need to fight back. They are not our friends. They are effectively a police system, and all cops are bad. Cops are not your friends. Establishment politicians, by and large, are not your friends. There may be one or two that speak out more loudly now about this, AOC, Bernie Sanders perhaps, but by and large, the vast majority of them on either side of the political aisle are conservative through and through. Democrats are just conservatives waiting to happen. If you scratch a Democrat, a conservative bleeds. They're fascists with more masks. That's what a white moderate is. That's what any moderate is. And moderacy is something, the legality is a moderacy argument that is being swept aside through the rise of fascism. And it furthermore, it just doesn't address anything to talk about legality. and yet you have various remnants of that. Legal, for instance. Cops are exploiting a legal loophole when this jackass says, is this legal? And is it legal for cops and feds to conceal their identity? And I respond to that, why does it matter if it's legal? If it was legal to genocide American citizens or people overseas, would that still make it right? This individual works for the Legal Eagle channel. They are a military lawyer. And I'm trying to see if they have information about this specific individual. But this individual is a military lawyer, and they're talking about, oh, the legality of this. Is this legal or not? Well, legality doesn't matter. They're fascists. Fascists are, their whole point is to dismantle the government and basically turn the instruments of imperialism against workers. So this person is doing the white moderate thing, and instead of saying, the quiet part out loud at this point when we really need to, it's a form of praxial inertia, where they're basically stalling, or they're denying things, or they're talking about something that just well and truly has passed in terms of its relevancy. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's legal or not. It never actually mattered if it was legal or not. Whether or not it's legal for the state to genocide workers is beside the point. It's states' rights versus worker rights. And the establishment has historically led us to this exact moment in time. And this exact moment in time is one where we are under attack. If the state made it legal for them to do so, again, there's also the legality of something versus Trump can do whatever he wants. Insofar as Legal Eagle himself says, Trump is officially above the law thanks to this one weird trick, and SCOTUS gave the green light to law by executive order. And we don't want to just say this. It's important to acknowledge this, but we need to go beyond just that and saying, okay, this is bad. Okay, well, not only is it bad, but it's something that we have to stand together and combat. And that requires activism. It requires saying, okay, we need to stop saying useless things at this point. Okay, the legality of things specifically. It's one thing to say, okay, this is what's going on. Trump is officially above the law thanks to this one weird trick, which means that ever and always it's workers versus the state, but now the state is become directly toxic or antagonistic towards workers more broadly at home. And if that's not going to wake people up, I don't know what will. It's perfectly fine to say this is the situation, but then to continue discussing the legality of it, it doesn't matter. This video should have been titled, ICE are the Gestapo, and they're violating people's basic human rights tied to the system itself. But this person's not going to want to do that, right? Because they're a white moderate. They're a lawyer that serves the state. Ultimately, they are not a revolutionary. They're not a criminal insofar as nonviolent protest, which is effectively what this is. We're not rioting. We're not resisting the state. If you don't resist, well, the Skeksis are going to drain your essence. Darth Vader is going to blow up Alderaan. So nonviolent protest isn't going to work. Okay, it doesn't. There is always some form of violence. And what I mean by that is regardless if you're peaceful or not, the state will call you violent. And sooner or later, when the IDF expands its ability to police citizens and with direct, approval from the state itself, people are going to have to fight back. They will be criminal in the eyes of the state insofar as if you stray, far from the tightrope that you're forced to walk upon, you will be attacked for it. It will be so easy to be treated as an enemy. Everyone will effectively be an enemy. It will be, okay, you have to prove your innocence. You have to prove your value to the state. So when the state starts cannibalizing workers more and more and seeing us as violent, then nonviolent protest is completely ineffective. It won't work. It hasn't worked, has it? Because look at where we're at. People will have to wake up. They'll have to fight back. That scene from Andor, the rioting scene shortly before, they have the ghost of the old woman, Marva, I think. And Marva is saying, if you are hearing this, I am dead. But I want you to know that you must fight back. You have to wake up. They want you asleep. The Empire wants you asleep. They're not just going to exploit people on the outer colonies and the outer rims. This is going to spread everywhere. You need to fight back. And fighting back is automatically illegal because anything that threatens states' rights versus worker rights is illegal. Worker rights, to take them away, is to make them, in effect, illegal. It is illegal for me to, for instance, use Medicaid to pay for my health care. And there are various other things, as far as the Miller test is concerned, that will also become illegal. And there are various other things that are being done, the violation of due process. This is a reality now. It's no longer something we can deny. It's not a question. It's not a question of it being legal or not. It's happening anyways. And to stop that, workers are going to have to fight back, regardless if it's legal or not. If the enemy, the state, is doing illegal things, then we have to do illegal things, which by and large just includes us existing. I'm trans, which means that I, by virtue of the state, am not allowed to exist. They are taking away healthcare insofar as it applies to me as a trans person. They are denying my right to exist and express myself through the work that I do. Certain forms of work will be illegal. That includes sex work, that includes activism, that includes activism through sex work, which is what I do. That includes me merely existing and saying that I'm here and I'm queer. Except in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan just hoped that the AIDS virus would kill all of the gays. But now, the disease is society itself becoming sick through the institutions of the state, which is attacking us. It's attacking workers. And because of that, the eye of Sauron has opened. It's always been open. Sauron didn't die during the War of the Ring. Isildur's Bane is profit itself. And as far as that goes, the same victims that endured the Holocaust during World War II, not just Jewish people, but people of color, other ethnic minorities, Roma populations, homosexuals, and just queer people more broadly, disabled people, neurodivergent people. All of that started largely, by and large, the book burnings, Prohibition, right, in Nazi Germany, started with the seizing of the Institute of Sexology, Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute of Sexology, and the burning of the books there. So this is the beginning of the Nazi rise to power. And regardless if it's legal or not, you must fight back. You have to do things that the state will disagree with, that are criminal. And what I mean by that is things that they will attack you for, regardless of if the courts care or not. That's what ICE is. Legality does not matter because ICE is illegal to some extent. They're violating human rights. The violation of due process, the taking away of people's rights. But even if you supposedly have those rights, they're going to attack you anyways. So if they're going to attack you anyways, you may as well fight back, because if you don't fight back, if you don't do what you need to do to survive, solidarize, speak out. You have to speak out and you have to challenge them. They can handle one area full of 10,000 people, but 10 areas full of 1,000 people, or 100 areas full of 100 people, they won't be able to handle that. Their power is a myth, okay? They have the means of production, but the ability to use that, like the Death Star was this Wunderwaffe, right? And the Wunderkind, the Hitler Youth, or the criminals that were pardoned by Trump, similar to those who were pardoned by the people in power under Hitler's Germany, were effectively used to maintain this position of strength. Their posturing is strong, but no one. These are not gods, and they're not all powerful. They are not beyond critique, but they're also just not invincible. Right now, the state is in a position of weakness, similar to the Empire from Star Wars, similar to the Skeksis in the Dark Crystal, where the Skeksis were literally decaying and losing their hold on the world around them. The crystal no longer could absorb energy from the cosmos, and they had to start drinking the blood of their own workers, their own labor force. That's what's happening here. So again, you have to recognize that things might seem hopeless right now and dangerous, but the state is doing this to try and preserve itself. So now is a time to do socialism. Now is not a time to be afraid. Now is a time to strike while the metal's hot, to get out there and to protest, to do things that very soon will become, if not already illegal, will become illegal outright in the eyes of the law. Trans people are already being targeted left and right by various forms of legislation. Trump himself said that we don't have a right to exist. They haven't technically passed a law yet, to my understanding, that makes it illegal to be gay. But I got news for you. If they pass a law like that, anyone could be gay in the eyes of the state. It's just an excuse to violate people's rights, to divide and conquer. Do not let them. Protest will become illegal. They will try and enact states' powers in such a way to steal as much as they can, to enrich themselves. Some men aren't after anything logical. Some men just want to watch the world burn. It's all about power. It's about holding on to things and abusing others to create a sense of inequality. Again, what Professor Jiang was talking about. Inequality is the whole point. They don't want things to be equal. They're addicted to power as something where they are alienated from the world around them. Capital alienates, and the bourgeoisie see everything around them not just as a threat, but vermin to exploit. We are automatically criminal in their eyes. We are workers to exploit, and we need to fight back regardless of what they say. The establishment is not your friend, and they are building the death camps, the concentration camps, on home soil. The police state is not going to protect you. All cops are bad? Well, the reality of that situation is they do not serve people. They serve private property. They serve the state. And that reality will also extend to lawyers, to judges, the Supreme Court, Congress. Like, so much for checks and balances. Like, again, these various things have always served power. And that's going to continue to be the case. And it's only going to accelerate and get worse if we don't fight back. But the good news is that not only is the state in a position of weakness, but also there's more territory. There's too much territory, despite the fact that ICE received all of this funding and they're federalizing sheriffs and local law enforcement to effectively betray their own communities more than they already have. There's just not enough people to police the United States. Nazi Germany, by comparison, was what, the size of Nebraska? Whereas the United States is, 50 times that size, give or take. The states are different sizes, but you get my drift. The United States is a much larger territory, and it's not something that it can effectively police the same way that Nazi Germany did to its own population. There's not enough territory surrounding it where it can build the camps. It can't just say Nazi Germany built the camps in Poland and sent people there. There's no Poland in the immediate vicinity for them to build the camps, so they're building them on home soil. There are some camps elsewhere that they can send people to, but also on home soil. But again, people are going to be aware of what's happening, and it's up to us to speak out and defend against them. They're in a position of weakness, which means we can fight back. Fredrick Douglas, power never conceded anything without a demand. It never did, it never will. And as soon as you find what people will quietly submit to, you know the full measure of what the state will take in response. Keeping that in mind, do not quietly submit, even if they make free speech illegal. If they make existing illegal, exist anyways. It doesn't matter. It's past the point of no return because the dogs of the state are out in full force kidnapping people, not in the dead of night, but in broad daylight. So they're already violating people's basic human rights. These are bandits, masked bandits, people who were pardoned from insurrection and various other crimes to enforce the state's will. They don't care about legality. They don't care about equality. They care about power. These are rapists. These are murderers. And they have been set loose to attack everyone. And they will specifically target minorities because that's their marching orders. But that includes anyone who fights back, who resists. You're not supposed to resist the police, right? That's what we're taught. They have total impunity, total power. That's always been the case. It's good cop, bad cop. Well, now the cops have all gone bad. And the good ones that remain are still cops. And they're going to have to violate the badge to defend workers if they care about that at all, which again is illegal. Like the same idea with the military, where is it legal to resist the commander-in-chief? Well, does it matter? Like when Trump was sending people down to LA in terms of Marines, the National Guard, and they're not equipped to handle that. They don't have the training. They're also not comfortable doing it. He's deploying, soldiers on U.S. soil to police people who are rioting, and to a very, a relatively small degree, and overreacting, but also being incompetent. So the system relies largely not through competency, but through dogma and fear, and making sure that people fall back onto white moderate arguments to hang themselves with their own rope. So you have to stop concerning yourself with what is legal or not legal, and what is violent or not violent, and instead consider that your mere existence has become criminal. Well, welcome to my small little world. Welcome to the sad world of people of color, of immigrants, of any marginalized people who live by a double standard, us versus them. And you have to realize that even if you have more privilege, even if you're just a white straight person, the state can take away your rights if you aren't a good little soldier, if you don't turn a blind eye. The enemy is active and hunting. The wolf is loose. And no pretense of legality is going to stop them. No amount of civility politics will stop them. The only thing that will stop them is decentralized action over an extended period. Making demands, banding together, communicating, survive, solidarize, and speak out, regardless if it's legal or not. I mean, that's just theoretically the case, but also, praxis is about worker rights versus states' rights. And states' rights argue what is or isn't legal to enforce profit. And profit is literally cannibalizing workers right now through Gestapo tactics, through a complete voiding of due process. All of this is completely moot now. Legality is completely moot. All that matters is surviving. All that matters is fighting back by surviving, but also by raising awareness towards what's happening. This isn't something that they can keep up. The war effort in Nazi Germany only lasted as long as they were able to fund it. And if we exhaust them, if we tire them out by spreading things out in such a way that they can't police their own territory, they can't effectively arrest everyone, then that is a very, very good start. When you're fighting an abuser, you have to take away their ability to harm you. And this is a group effort. United we stand, divided we fall. And not only that, but there's labor action. There is the communication of dissident ideas through the circulation of media. There's so many different things that you can do. Literally just, here's a pamphlet saying, hey, we deserve basic human rights. What do you think a picket line is? The right to assembly, the right to protest. And you need to push back. When the state tries to take from you, push back. That's the only way to stop an abuser, to draw a line in the sand, but also to move the goalpost in the other direction. The state does it towards basically the complete annihilation of our rights in pursuit of profit. We have to challenge profit to have what I call the whore's revenge. When the man comes around, show him your aegis, repel him, remind him that the harvest is human and the state is inhumane. I've prepared my entire adult life towards this moment, and this is what I have to say in regards to the taking away of people's free speech, the taking away of people's right to protest, the taking away of people's right to exist, of healthcare, of house and home. The home has become alien and is occupied by the usual Radcliffean bandits. The call is coming from inside the house, so we must answer in response, call and response. When fascism comes home to empire, now is socialism's time to put in work and prevent this from happening now and in the future for past, present, and future victims. So this is, hopefully I didn't go on for too long about all of this, but this is incredibly important. And this is the kind of content that I'll be making in the future. Me talking about this, repetition is important with any rebellion. A slogan, right? Survive, solidarize, speak out, ACAB, free Palestine, and all embargoed land. If the native is limited in a settler colony, then other people who live here now will be treated as native in ways that can be eliminated as well by the constant invader. Invasion as a structure. And that invasion is ongoing and it is accelerating, which means that our response must also accelerate. So sorry if this is alarming. There is a certain amount of alarm that needs to be, handled, realized, and dealt with. But at the same time, there is room for optimism. As powerful as these people think they are, they're cowards. They are afraid, and they are also largely incompetent. The Nazis, despite all of their bluster, lost the war. And it took a great deal of courage. It took a great deal of fighting. People die in these kinds of conflicts. They'll die regardless. If you sit on the sidelines, you're going to get smacked by the state. If you stand up and fight, you'll also get smacked by the state. But at least then you can fight back. And then if enough people do it all at once, everywhere, then the state will have no choice but to back down. And that's our only option at this point. It's all we can do. So, again, this is the kind of content that I'll be making basically from here on out. Apart from essays, I'll be doing react videos like this where I am constantly repeating various refrains. And I'm not going to stop until I'm forced to stop. Not while there's a breath in my body. I will carry the message along. And I'm doing that. I live in a relatively safe state. I have relative privilege, and I'm going to use that to stand up for the rights of my fellow workers, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their orientation, their sexual orientation, their gender, regardless of their religion. It's workers' rights are sacred, and we're all under attack right now. If you like the video, like, share, and subscribe. You can also support my content on YouTube. Every little bit helps as far as this goes. I'm going to keep making content regardless, but if you want to help me continue making content, just in case, things happen, especially in times of crisis like this, every little bit helps, and it goes a long way, and I appreciate it, even if you're just watching and leaving comments. I appreciate that too. We need to raise awareness. It's very important. It is paramount. It is of the utmost importance. And with all of that being said, thank you for watching. And until next time, stay safe out there and solidarity.